Nephew sought the truth about his identity, caught between his mother's lies and my moral dilemma, while yearning to belong. Jack is my boyfriend's 14-year-old nephew, but honestly, I've considered him my own nephew since the day he was born. Even though I'm not married to his uncle, that's just how family works in my part of the world. Jack's mother, my sister-in-law, wanted a child so desperately when she was in her 30s or late 20s that she somehow convinced or perhaps paid, she's never been clear on that point, a coworker to father her child. Jack has always gravitated toward me because, as he tells me, I'm the cool aunt. Especially now that he's a teenager, he confides in me in a way he can't with anyone else. What we know about Jack's biological father: he was either a coworker or acquaintance of his mom, he's black, he was married and had kids, and he might have been deported back to his home country, though no one is sure if he left willingly. The only thing his mother is adamant about is that this man never knew he fathered a child. She never told him or anyone else his identity. But she's built this web of lies around Jack's conception over the years. Out of shame or maybe fear, I can only guess at her reason, she wove a story for everyone to follow. Jack was supposedly conceived during a trip to Italy, a wild night of passion with a mysterious Italian man she met on the beach. She told a few of us who know the truth to keep up the charade that Jack, because of his curly hair and dark skin, is half Italian. She never seemed to care that he was conceived a whole 2 months after her Italian vacation. The thing is, Jack looks black, unmistakably so. He has every pronounced feature, the beautiful hair texture, and the darkest skin you can imagine, while his mother is whiter than snow. Still, she insists he's the product of 2 Caucasians, just Mediterranean enough to explain away his appearance. At a recent family reunion, Jack quietly approached me and asked if we could talk privately. He didn't want to bring it up with his mom, or his uncle, because he was certain the conversation would get back to her. So, under the pretext of an ice cream run, I took him for a drive. In the car, Jack opened up. It was heartbreaking. He told me kids at school had started calling him a nigger. Out here, in the middle of rural nowhere, there aren't many black kids, and people stare at difference the way they stare at a UFO sighting. He tried telling them he's half Italian, but they laughed right in his face. He knows he looks black, and, as he put it, he's pretty sure his father was black too. He told me he doesn't mind being half black, doesn't even care about knowing his father, but he just wants to belong. He's tired of the uneven buzz cuts his mother gives him, tired of not understanding how to care for his own hair, tired of being forced into a mold that doesn't fit him. He wants to experiment with hairstyles like the ones he's seen on TV. He loves hip-hop, but his mom won't let him listen to it. She says she's worried he'll start catching mannerisms associated with rappers. Instead, she forces him to listen to classic rock, the music she grew up with. He told me they had just started learning about slavery in school, and he wants to dig deeper, to understand the history of his people. Looking at him, I saw a teenage boy desperate to belong, but also terrified that seeking out the truth, or simply admitting who he is, will make his mother angry. All his life, she's tried to make him someone he isn't, and now he's stuck between who he is and who she wants him to be. I didn't tell him the truth that day. I told him I'd do my best to help him, but I couldn't make any promises. Instead, I gave him a flash drive full of my favorite hip-hop and reggae albums, and a massive pair of headphones which, by the way, he wears nearly 24/7 now, because, as he says, they are fashionable. After our talk, I told my boyfriend what had happened. We both agree his sister is being ridiculous, and he confronted her about it. She doubled down. Jack is not black, he's half Italian, end of story. If we cross her, she threatened, she'll forbid us from seeing him. But honestly, kids these days have every form of social media, and she can barely send an email. The grandparents won't get involved either. They made it clear they will always take their daughter's side, insisting she knows best. Out of concern, I spoke with my supervisor at work about Jack's situation. Beyond work, we have a genuine friendship, and she and her husband are both from Africa. She suggested I bring Jack to meet her family for a day, letting him connect with her husband, who even offered to give him a crash course in black hair for men 101 and talk about things my boyfriend and I might not even think of, like ingrown hairs and other things specific to black men. Their twins are Jack's age, love the same things, and I could see him making friends outside of his insular school circle. My boyfriend and I both think this is a wonderful idea, but his sister's ultimatum hangs over us. We're torn. If we go behind her back and she finds out, Jack will likely be the one to suffer for our actions. I'm at crossroads. I desperately want to tell Jack the truth about his origins, and let him embrace the offer to meet my supervisor's family so he can finally see positive role models who look like him, who have walked the paths he's just starting to explore. But I'm terrified of what the fallout might be, not for me, but for him. Update 1. After a long discussion with my boyfriend, We decided to invite his nephew Jake for the weekend. Our goal was to finally set the record straight about his origins, and to introduce him to my supervisor's family. My boyfriend called his sister last week and told her we'd take Jake for a weekend in the city, something that happens often, so she wasn't suspicious. Last Friday, I picked Jake up from school and we drove home. In the car, we dove into conversations about music. He absolutely loved the selection I put together for him on the memory card: school, girls, and life in general. At dinner, my boyfriend brought up the talk I had with Jake during the family reunion. He explained that together, we'd thought long and hard about what Jake confided in me, weighed the pros and cons, and finally decided that we couldn't keep the truth from him anymore. So, we sat Jake down and told him what we knew. Yes, his dad was black, which makes him half black, and no, he wasn't conceived in Italy. His mom got pregnant 2 months after her trip there. We made it clear we were telling him this despite his mom's direct order, simply because lying to him about who he is wasn't something we could live with. I told Jake about my supervisor's family, their background, similarities, and their offer to meet him. His eyes lit up and without hesitation, he said he wanted to meet them. The next morning, we met up with my supervisor's family at the mall. It was immediate magic. Jake and the twins clicked instantly, and within a couple of hours, they acted like they'd been friends forever. We all had lunch together and took them to the park near my supervisor's house, where the kids played soccer all afternoon with the twins' friends and neighbors. That evening, Jake called to ask if he could stay for dinner with the twins with their parents' blessing, of course, and later, he checked again if it was okay to spend the night. The next morning, after a community brunch, the twins had hockey practice, so my supervisor's husband, Henry, drove Jake back to our place. On the drive back, Henry talked with Jake, a real man-to-man conversation about personal topics: grooming, not knowing your father, growing up mixed race, and what it all means. We never pried into what was said, but Jake later told us that Henry's advice put him at ease in a way he'd never felt before. For the very first time, he said, he felt like he could truly be himself. Later that day, my supervisor called me. She said Jake was a polite, well-mannered young man, and that he was welcome in their home anytime. Before taking Jake home, we wanted him to know it was completely his choice whether or not to tell his mom what he'd learned. We promised him we'd back him up, whatever he decided, and assured him he could reach out to us anytime, by any means, if he needed us. Jake decided to come clean to his mom. He told her everything, that we told him the truth about his origins, that he'd spent the weekend with his new friends. He told her he was done being laughed at for pretending to be someone he wasn't. Just because he knew he was half black and liked hip-hop, didn't mean he was going to turn into some kind of stereotype, as she seemed to fear. He told her, too, that he was going to start growing out his hair. He wanted an afro, whether she liked it or not. Predictably, his mother lost it. She called us, furious, accusing us of undermining her authority and threatening to cut us out completely. My boyfriend did his best to calm her, but she escalated and even threatened to call the police. He was done arguing and told her to call us back once she'd calmed down. A little later, she actually did call the police. The officer who called us back was kind and level-headed. He just wanted to clarify that my boyfriend's sister wanted both of us arrested and thrown in jail for telling Jake the truth about his father's race. We confirmed the story. The officer said he'd have a talk with her about the proper use of police resources and the consequences of making frivolous reports. He asked about Jake's well-being and let us know he'd pay a visit to make sure everything was okay. Jake actually had a file with CPS from a couple of years ago after we made a complaint about his mother, so apparently, they were being especially careful. I called Jake to keep him in the loop. He told me his mother had gotten so angry at him that he ran next door to his grandparents' house. He explained the situation to them, and they wanted to talk with my boyfriend about it as well. They had a quick conversation, and both agreed that Jake's mother was being absolutely absurd about the whole situation. They apologized to Jake for lying to him all these years, admitting they never should have let his mother make that decision. They went on to call their daughter and basically put her in a timeout. Jake is spending the week with his grandparents now while his mother takes some time to reflect on what she's done and the consequences of her actions. The grandparents also contacted the police officer to reassure him that Jake is safe at their house and that they would be keeping a close eye on his mother. Reflecting back, when I first learned the truth and considered what to do, I was weighed down with uncertainty. I come from a background where I know both my parents and grandparents, stories of my ancestors. I never once doubted where I came from. The idea of withholding such a vital truth from a child was unimaginable to me, but hearing stories from people who'd lived through something similar to Jake's situation changed everything. Learning just how important it is for a person to know their origins and how damaging it can be to be lied to about something so crucial helped me realize that telling Jake the truth truly was the best decision, even if it meant risking family peace. Update 2. The police officer, who had called us earlier, paid my mom a visit. Afterward, he called us back to let us know that, obviously, they wouldn't be pursuing her complaint against us. Not long after, Jake called to ask if he could come over again for the weekend. In the middle of our conversation, he told me his mom had finally admitted the truth that his biological dad was indeed black. The way she handled it was so typical of her. She acted as if she had been backed into a corner and accused him with this weird, "Are you happy you ruined everything now?" sort of attitude. She's now lifted her ban on hip-hop music and black hairstyles, but she told Jake, with alarming seriousness, that it would be our fault if he became a gangster. What can I say? I guess that's something we can live with for now. But on to more serious matters. This week, my boyfriend had a frank conversation with his dad. Together, they decided that Jake and his mom should move in with him. Their house is literally next door, it's huge, paid off, and they'll be able to keep a closer eye on things over there. Apparently, this move was prompted by Jake's mom struggling with rent and bills again and, of course, her extremely questionable choice to call the police over such a trivial issue. My boyfriend took the opportunity to tell his dad that maybe, just maybe, it was time to have a real discussion about his sister's mental state. He's genuinely worried about what's going to happen to her, and to Jake, once their parents aren't there anymore. For the first time, I think his dad's starting to see the truth. He told us he's making an appointment with an attorney to discuss options, though he's already anticipating that Mill is going to raise hell about it. Then the biggest bombshell dropped on us. We found out they are actually the legal guardians of Jake. Ever since we made the call to CPS 10 years ago, the grandparents have had legal authority over him. They never bothered to share the tiny detail with us. So while Jake has always lived with his mom, it's his grandparents who have truly been in charge, which just goes to show how far they are willing to go to shield her from the consequences of her actions. We offered to have Jake over for weekends and holidays, if he wanted. His grandparents hesitated at first, but finally agreed as long as we pick him up from school on Fridays and drive him back Sunday evenings. It's an hour's drive each way, but we're happy to do it for him. And with Jake starting high school next year, we've come up with an idea we're ready to propose. He could stay with us for the whole school year to attend high school in the city, right near our place. He's always gravitated towards learning a trade, and this school offers a unique program where students can try different trades and then transfer their credits when they graduate. It just feels right, something that could finally offer Jake the chance to thrive, away from the chaos that's always followed him at home. Update 3. Jake and his mom moved in with his grandparents on Tuesday. It wasn't a triumphant march so much as a controlled surrender. His grandpa had already cleared a room, brought in a proper desk, even found an old stereo he'd kept from the 90s. Jake carried a duffel, and it was all Grandma whispered to me later that he'd thrown half his clothes into a donation box because he didn't want to look like he lived at a garage sale anymore. His mom hovered in the doorway, looking tiny and furious in a way that made me feel both sad for her and very, very tired. That same afternoon, his grandpa met with the attorney. I sat in the kitchen with Grandma pretending to drink tea while I waited for the call. When it finally came, Grandpa put it on speaker. Guardianship is still in place. They have full authority over medical, schooling, and day-to-day. The attorney was blunt about it. If you think a change is in Jake's best interests, you don't need your daughter's permission. You need a plan. I could hear the creak of Grandpa's chair as he exhaled like a man who'd been holding his breath for a decade. Jake arrived at our place Friday evening for his first official every other weekend. He walked in with that giant pair of headphones around his neck and a cloud of energy I hadn't seen before. He showed me the Google Doc he made with the twins' help of hair goals, pen pictures of tight curls, soft afros, fades with lineups. Saturday morning, we took him to a barber shop in the city that Henry recommended. The smell of clipper oil and aftershave hit us the second the door opened. The barber, a man with a salt and pepper beard and a smile as warm as summer, had him in the chair in 3 minutes flat. "First time?" he asked, comb teasing through Jake's curls. "First time that counts," Jake said, and I watched the barber's eyes soften. They talked like old friends the entire time, about school, about music, about how to train a curl pattern without ripping it to shreds. When the barber turned Jake to the mirror for the lineup, Jake put his hand over his mouth. He didn't say anything for a long moment. When he finally did, it was just, "Oh." On the drive home he took 100 selfies and sent every single one to the twins. Later that night he FaceTimed them and they all roasted each other and then himself in that teenage boy way that is both merciless and affectionate. At some point, his mom texted him, "Nice gangster cut," which I saw over his shoulder, and he rolled his eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck. He didn't engage. He just went back to talking to me about the difference between a curl sponge and twist method like he'd been doing it all his life. On Sunday, we toured the high school we want him to attend in the city. It's an old brick building with a new wing that smells like sawdust and metal. They let him try welding a bee, and then help wire a mock light switch. When the electrical teacher, a tall black man with calloused hands, said, "First day, and your hands are already steady, don't waste that," I watched Jake stand up straighter. He talked to the guidance counselor about the trades program, asked questions I didn't even know to ask, and when we were back in the car he said, very quietly, "That felt like oxygen." We brought that line as words to his grandparents, and the attorney helped us turn it into paperwork. They can't enroll him. There will be logistics and buses and probably a new set of headaches, but the path is clear. When Grandpa told his daughter, she pinched the bridge of her nose like she was trying to hold her skull together and said, "So you're sending him to gang school now?" Grandma put her tea down hard enough to slosh. "Enough," she said. "You don't get to weaponize your shame anymore." I don't think I've ever heard her raise her voice like that. Jake was sitting at the table doing algebra homework. He didn't look up, he just reached for Grandma's hand under the table and squeezed it. The CPS worker dropped by on Wednesday. She sat at the same kitchen table and drank the same weak tea and took notes in neat loops. She asked Jake how he was doing and he said, with a teenager's bluntness, "Better." She asked him what made it better and he said, "Being allowed to be black, and going to a real barber." She wrote that down too. She talked with his mom privately for a while. When she left, his mom came into the living room, eyes red, and said, "Apparently I have to go to therapy now, or they'll escalate." She said therapy the way some people say root canal. Grandpa nodded. "We're going with you," he said. It wasn't a question. She didn't answer. She just sat down on the couch and stared at the carpet until Grandma put a blanket over her knees like she was a child. Somewhere in that week, Jake asked if he could do a DNA test. Not a father hunt, he insisted. Medical stuff, he said. History. Curiosity. He looked at me and then at his grandparents. "I won't send anything without you seeing it." We didn't push. We also didn't dance around the fear we all felt about what swab and a database might uncork. Grandpa called the attorney again to be safe. Then we drove to Walgreens, bought a kit, and I watched Jake sit at our kitchen table reading the tiny print like it mattered, because it did. The results came back last night. We were all still awake, sprawled in various stages of pajama and anxiety. The email hit my phone first. Jake had it open on us before I could say anything. He sat very, very still. West African percentages and charts I don't pretend to fully understand popped up beautiful in their own nerdy, impersonal way, but we were all scanning for one thing. Matches. The first name on the list wasn't a match that meant anything to me. It meant everything to him. Second cousin, it said, with a Senate Morgan number that made my head spin. The profile had a picture of a woman with a gap-toothed smile somewhere between 30 and 40, and a hometown that made my stomach flip. 2 towns over. 2. Jake looked at me. He looked at his grandparents. He set the phone down like it was a crystal figurine and not a piece of glass and plastic. "Can I message her?" he asked. His grandpa's hands were shaking a little when he said yes. He typed for 10 minutes, telling her his first name, his age, the town, that he thought they might be related and that he was only reaching out because his grandparents paused while he glanced up his guardians had said it was okay. He pressed send. We didn't turn the phones off. We didn't turn the lights off. We just sat there with the clock ticking and the dog snoring and his mom pacing upstairs. 20 minutes later, the little speech bubble popped up. "Hi Jake," it started. "I've been waiting to hear from someone like you for a long time. I am not ashamed to say that my hands went cold." She said, her name was Nora. She said she grew up here, left for a while, came back to help her parents. She said her uncle used to work at the warehouse with a white lady named Laura who got teased a lot because she brought Tupperware of weird salads and called the time clock the puncher. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to stop from laughing because it was exactly the kind of detail life writes and you couldn't make up if you tried. Then she sent a photo. It was a man in an oversized holiday sweater at a company ugly sweater party, hand on someone's shoulder just out of frame. Dark skin. The exact same eyes as Jake. The caption, "My Uncle Kofi, Christmas 2009. I watched Jake's face while he looked at the picture. He seemed to shrink and expand at the same time, like a heart under an ultrasound when it fails and empties. He didn't cry. He didn't talk. He just touched the screen very gently, the way you might touch a baby's forehead. We kept going. I asked, carefully, about the deported rumor. Nora said no, he wasn't deported. He left, back to Ghana for a few years when his father got sick, then came back, then left again for good after he and his wife split. He had 3 kids, she wrote. My cousins. 2 boys and a girl. She said he never said a word about child here. He would have stayed, she wrote. He would have done right. His mother had come halfway down the stairs at some point without us noticing. She was standing in the doorway in one of Grandpa's old flannels, eyes on the phone, face as white as the hall paint. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. There was a second where I saw the truth cross her face like a storm front. If she had told the truth 14 years ago, the life in that picture might have been here in a high chair at someone's Christmas, next to a woman in a sweater who actually liked her weird salads. Jake looked up and saw her. He didn't flinch. He just said, in a voice I didn't know he had yet, "Mom, you can't sit." She sat. We took a break. We drank water. Grandma brought out a plate of apple slices like we were toddlers, who had to keep our blood sugar up. Then Nora's next message pinged, and we all leaned in again as if we had rehearsed it. "We want to meet you. If you want," she wrote. I talked to my Aunt Jur. "Maybe Grandma." She said she always had a feeling there was more to the story. She would like to see you. No pressure. We can start small. Me, you, public place. My son and your cousin, Eric. He's 16. Looks just like you when he was 14. Jake exhaled like he'd been underwater. We decided on next Saturday, the park, the library in the next town over. Daylight. No cameras. We told Nora we'd bring a chaperone wall of grandparents, a cool aunt, an uncle, a supervisor named Henry if that made everyone feel safer. She sent a laughing emoji and a heart and said, "Bring whoever you need. We'll be the ones with a sweater nobody asked for." When I drove Jake home, he held my hand at a red light like he was 6 again and had just crossed a parking lot. "Is it okay that I'm happy?" he asked. "Even if it makes Mom sad, it's okay to be everything you are," I said, and for once it didn't feel like a line someone writes to sound wise. It felt like the plainest possible truth. On the porch, Grandma hugged me and whispered, "Thank you," into my hair in a way that almost broke me. Inside, his mom was at the table with a spiral notebook, actually writing things down. She looked up. "I'm coming to therapy," she said, voice frayed but steady. "I'm not promising I'm going to like it." Update 4. It was cold enough that the park benches had a thin skin of frost on them, the kind that looks solid until you press a thumb into it and it goes to glass. We got there early because Grandma always gets there early. Jake wore the hoodie Henry gave him, headphones looped like a necklace, hair picked into a soft halo that actually made strangers smile at him as they passed. Nora arrived with a thermos under one arm and a boy at her shoulder who could have been Jake with a different haircut and 2 extra inches. The gap in her teeth flashed when she saw us. "Hi," she said, like we were neighbors who had just run into each other at the grocery store and not people about to rearrange a family tree. Eric stuck out his hand to Jake like he'd been practicing it in a mirror. "Cousin," he said, then looked at his own hand and laughed at himself and went straight in for a hug that made Jake's chin end up on his shoulder. You could feel all the air shift after that. We took the picnic table by the basketball court. Nora unscrewed the thermos and said, "It's Chaloff, don't fight me on who makes it best, it's me," in a way that made Grandma beam. She'd brought paper plates, of course, because mothers the world over bring paper plates to battle the same way knights bring shields. Nora had a way of talking that rolled like a song, little rises and falls, hands drawing punctuation in the air. She told Jake his father really did work at the warehouse, on the night shift most weeks, and that he used to show up to holiday parties with a Santa hat and jewelry because he loved a theme more than anyone should. She said he'd leave sticky notes on the break room coffee pot, with terrible puns. "December Cafe," she said, and did such a good impression of a man I've never met that it made something funny and painful happen in my chest. We handed over the pieces we had how old Jake was, his birthday, the parts of the story we could actually lay on a table without anyone breaking. Nora nodded. "Kofi's a Friday born," she said, glancing at Grandma as if to check that we understood the whole day name thing, and then asked Jake what day he was. He pulled out his phone, thumbs flying. "Wednesday," he said after a beat, holding it up like a receipt. "Kwaku," Nora said softly, and then louder, with pride, "Kwaku," like she'd just named him and it stuck. The boys drifted to the court with the ball someone had left behind, and the rhythm of a game that neither of them seemed to be keeping score for took over. I sat with Grandma and Grandpa and watched 2 timelines learn each other's steps. Nora kept talking. She said Kofi had gone back to Ghana when his father got sick, came back after the funeral, tried to make his marriage work, didn't, then left again. Not deported. No handcuffs. Just life, messy and human. We asked the question without putting a knife edge on it, "Does he know?" She looked at her hands, nails short, a streak of flour still at the base of her thumb like she'd baked something at some point this morning. "No," she said. "No one told him. But he's asked. 4 years he's asked if there was someone he should have found. His jokes get worse when he's nervous, they were bad for a long time. She had her phone on the table the way you put a talisman down. I can tell him, she said. Not today. Not in a blitz. But soon. And I won't. She gestured toward Jake, toward my boyfriend, toward Grandma with her fingers twined white-knuckled. I won't do it without you knowing every step. We didn't hover when the boys started doing that half game where you talk more than you shoot. Eric showed Jake a move and Jake tried it and failed spectacularly and then did it again and landed it clean. He threw his head back and whooped in a way I have not heard from him ever, and a man walking his dog across the green turned and grinned like joy is loud and contagious and had just caught him. Halfway through, Nora's phone buzzed. She looked down and went very still. She turned the screen to me. A contact that said Uncle K with a string of flags behind it. A missed video call. Before any of us could decide what to do, it rang again. Nora's mouth formed the word OK without sound. She hit accept and tilted the phone so only the table saw. A square of a face filled the screen, laugh lines deep enough to keep secrets in, eyes I'd already seen last night on my own couch, and a sweater so aggressively patterned I knew I'd like him immediately. Nora, he said, voice warm and carrying. What are you cooking that smells like you're bribing angels? Nora held the phone so that he could only see her. She didn't blink much. I'm at the park, she said. With people. There are moments where language is a sweater you can pull over your head and moments it's a zipper that won't catch. She wrestled, then she took a breath that came from somewhere honest. With Laura's son, she said. He did not flinch like I braced for. He closed his eyes for a long second and when he opened them they were wet and clear. Is he well? He asked, as if that was the only question that ever mattered. Nora nodded. Then she asked him if he wanted to say hello, not a big hello, not a forever hello. Just hello. Jake had stopped moving on the court in that strange psychic way families have before they are even sure they are family. He and Eric ambled back with the ball pinched between them like a peace offering. Nora put the phone down flat on the table so that the camera angle made Uncle K look like he was sitting among salt packets and napkins. Hi, Jake said to a square of glass, as solemn as a handshake. I'm Jake. Huaku, the man said, name rolling like a blessing. I am Kofi. I am happy to hear you. They did not say the words you think you would say. They did not apologize for the past, did not collapse under the weight of 14 years and 10 seconds. They did something smaller and in that smallness, more enormous than any pronouncement. He asked Jake if he liked plantain. Jake said he didn't know yet. He asked him if he liked football. Jake said soccer or football, which made Kofi laugh so hard he leaned out of frame. He told him a joke about two electricians walking into a bar that was so bad Jake held his reps. At some point in the middle of this, Grandma put both hands over her mouth and cried quietly without moving, like a person absorbing a wave on purpose. Then Kofi's phone glitched, his signal wobbled, the way these calls always do at the one moment you want them not to. Before he faded to gray, he said, quickly, like a man missing a train, I am in Columbus for 2 months. Work. I can drive. I can come next weekend. If your guardians say I can. If you want. He said guardians like Nora had told him to use the right word and he wanted to be the man who used the right word. Grandpa cleared his throat in that king of the courtroom way he gets when he's just a farmer who raised 2 kids and a dozen tomatoes and a stubborn daughter. We'll be here, he said to a phone on a table, to a man on a highway 2 states away, to the boy next to him who'd stopped pretending not to shake. After the call, Nora exhaled so hard she fogged the thermos lid. Okay, she said. Okay, small steps. We walked the flaps so the boys could talk without an audience. Eric told Jake about a Gunna Independence Day party, his church does at the rec center with high life music and aunties who would feed you until you begged for mercy. Come, he said, like an offer and an instruction. He asked Jake his birthday again and put it in his own phone. I'm putting you in his kwaku, he said, because you're irritating and I like you. Back at the table, Jake's mother arrived not like a storm this time, more like weather finally changing. She wore a sweater instead of armor and she carried a paper bag like a talisman. She had sat in the parking lot for 15 minutes, she said later, and watched us and had not run. She came up to Nora and stuck out her hand. I was cruel, she said without preface. Her voice shook but not enough to hide in. I did a cruel thing. I can't fix it but I can stop doing it. She set the bag down. Inside, a pack of satin pillowcases, a leave-in conditioner Henry had recommended, a pack of those coil hair ties that don't creak when you pull them out. It was not atonement. It was not enough. It was at least in the shape of care. Nora looked at her for a long time. She did not hug her. She did not aim for sainthood. She nodded once and then turned to Jake. "You tell me when you are ready for aunties," she said. "We will go slow. I can protect both your heart and his. It can be both." School, meanwhile, moved forward like a machine someone finally plugged in. The guidance counselor from the city called Grandma directly. Guardianship allows enrollment. The bus picks up at the church lot. Here's a map, and then emailed me a list so thorough it made me want a bake or a pie. We went to orientation yesterday. Jake learned how to change a saw blade and got a safety glass case he kept opening and closing like a locket. He signed up for Intro to Electrical with the same teacher who told him not to waste those steady hands, and for Auto Basics because he likes the way engines sound like language he could learn. The barbershop took him in on Friday afternoon when we just stopped by to say hi. He swept hair for an hour without being asked to, then asked if he could come back next week. The owner slid him a crumpled $5 and told him if he showed up on time, there'd be more where that came from. First job, Jake said on the way home in a voice stuck somewhere between 12 and 30. He bought Grandma flowers with a $5 and we peeled off the sticker together because he said it looked cheap. Therapy has started. Week 1 was intake and scab picking. She came home with a handout and eyes that looked like she'd been to the gym with her soul. She says shame is heavy, she told me on the porch, each word like stepping on stones across a creek. I am tired of lifting it. She wrote an apology in that spiral notebook, 3 pages, front and back. She asked me to read it and not grade it. I did. I did sit at the kitchen table and listen while she read it to Jake, voice hard at first and then softer, like she'd found a way to breathe while walking uphill. CPS King, by again. The worker sat on the same chair, wrote in the same loops. We like plans, she said. We like grandparents. We like haircuts. She smiled when she said it, but she meant it. She said if therapy continues and school enrollment sticks, they will scale back to quarterly check-ins. She said she'd be at the rec center on Independence Day because her girlfriend's family is Nigerian and she knows a good party when she hears one. Grandma invited her to bring Tupperware. Tonight, Jake sat at our dining table and traced his birthday onto a sticky note. KWAKU, he wrote, like he was practicing a signature. He stuck it to the back of his phone and then to the mirror by the door and then to his forehead and made a face until I laughed. His phone pinged. A calendar invite from Nora, Saturday, 1 p.m. Same park. Title, Small Hello, Part 2. He looked at me over the top of his screen. I saw the boy who showed up on my porch with uneven buzz cuts and a heart that had been asked to be smaller than it was. I saw the young man with a first job and a new name and a cousin who shouted across the court that he was irritating and liked. Is it weird that I'm excited and scared at the same time? He asked. It means you're paying attention, I said. He nodded, heaved that backpack of his onto one shoulder, and then stopped in the doorway. When he comes, he said, when Kofi comes here I want to be at the park already. I don't want to walk toward him. I want to be standing where I am.